but it was really a nano weapon, and it took us to war.
What if the apocalypse that destroyed the world in Silo wasn't a nuclear war, but something so tiny you couldn't even see it? Something that could enter your body, take over machines, and potentially turn the entire planet into a graveyard. That's the terrifying idea behind the Gray Goo nanobots introduced in Season 3. And honestly, once you understand what these nanobots are capable of, a lot of the biggest mysteries in Silo suddenly start making much more sense. Welcome back to your nerdy show. I'm your host, Spoiler Master. So, how did this technology begin? Why was Charlotte's Navy crew sacrificed? And most importantly, how did these microscopic machines lead to the creation of the silos? Let's break it all down. The Gray Goo wasn't always part of the story. If you've been watching Silo since Season 1, you probably remember that the biggest mystery was pretty simple. What happened to the world outside? We knew something had made the surface deadly. We knew the people inside the silos had been deliberately isolated, and we knew that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep everyone from discovering the truth. But Seasons 1 and 2 never really explained the technology behind the apocalypse. Then Season 3 completely changed the game. Right from Episode 1, we were introduced to Charlotte, a member of a US Navy crew flying over Iran, and suddenly she and her team encountered this strange, dark cloud in the sky. At first, it almost looked like some kind of storm, but it wasn't. As soon as the aircraft entered the cloud, everything went horribly wrong. Charlotte's fellow crew members began dying. The aircraft system started failing, and Charlotte eventually lost control of her plane and crashed. She survived, but she had no idea what had actually attacked them. And that mystery becomes incredibly important later, because by Episode 8, Silo finally gives us a massive piece of the puzzle. That mysterious cloud wasn't just toxic gas. It was nanotechnology. A nanotech arms race was already happening. Now this is where the story gets really interesting. Episode 8 takes us back into the past, before the silos became humanity's last refuge. Charlotte, Daniel Keene, Helen, Senator Thurman, and billionaire technology entrepreneur Per Stensen are together at dinner, and Stensen reveals something absolutely terrifying. There's already a global race to develop nanotechnology-based weapons. Think about the nuclear arms race from our own history. Except instead of massive missiles and nuclear warheads, imagine countries competing to build microscopic machines that can potentially enter almost anything. And according to Stensen, creating these nano-weapons was surprisingly easy compared with developing nuclear weapons. That's what makes the situation so frightening. You don't need a giant missile factory. You don't need enormous weapons. You need technology that can be manufactured and deployed on a microscopic scale. And once multiple countries have access to it, controlling the situation becomes incredibly difficult. Stensen explains that the United States is trying to stay ahead, but other countries are rapidly catching up. Iran, in particular, has developed its own nanotechnology, and this brings us to one of the most important revelations in the episode. The Washington attack was a nanotech attack. Remember the so-called dirty bomb attack that was blamed on Iran? Well, according to Stensen, it wasn't actually a conventional dirty bomb. It was the first domestic deployment of a nanoweapon. And that changes everything, because suddenly, the world isn't simply dealing with terrorism or conventional warfare. It's dealing with a new kind of weapon that governments may not even fully understand. Imagine releasing billions of microscopic machines into an environment. You can't easily see them, you can't simply shoot them, and depending on how they're programmed, they could potentially interact with biological systems, machines, infrastructure, or the environment itself. That's essentially the nightmare scenario of Gray Goo. And this is why the people behind the Silo project become convinced that a larger catastrophe is coming. They believe a global nanotech war is becoming inevitable. And if that happens, humanity could disappear. So what exactly is Gray Goo? Now, the term Gray Goo comes from a classic hypothetical scenario involving self-replicating nanotechnology, and the basic idea is terrifyingly simple. Imagine microscopic machines capable of building copies of themselves using materials around them. One machine becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8. And if that process continues exponentially, you could eventually have an enormous swarm of machines consuming available material. It's basically the technological version of an unstoppable infection. And Silo seems to be using a variation of that concept. The gray cloud encountered by Charlotte isn't necessarily a giant cloud of magical dust. It's a massive concentration of airborne nanomachines. And once Charlotte's aircraft enters that cloud, those machines get inside the plane. From there, they begin interfering with the aircraft systems. The result? The pilots lose control. And that explains why Charlotte's crew starts dying almost immediately. But here's the really disturbing part. Charlotte's mission wasn't an accident. Charlotte's crew was sent into the trap. This might be one of the cruelest revelations in the entire story. Charlotte and her fellow Navy pilots weren't simply unlucky. They were used. Their mission was connected to a hidden Iranian nanotechnology facility built inside a mountain. The United States wanted to find out where Iran was developing its nanoweapons, but there was a problem. How do you locate and expose a secret facility that's specifically designed to remain hidden? You make the enemy reveal itself, and that's exactly what happened. Charlotte's team was essentially used as bait. Their mission was designed to force Iran to deploy its nanotechnology, and once the weapon appeared, another covert American team could identify the facility and attack it. The pilots were decoys, sacrificial pieces in a much larger operation, and that means Charlotte was never supposed to survive. When Helen discovers the truth, she immediately recognizes the inconsistencies in Thurman and Stensen's story, and eventually, the truth comes out. Charlotte and her crew were knowingly sent into an extremely dangerous situation because their deaths were considered acceptable collateral damage. And honestly, that makes her later decision to support the Silo project even more complicated, because she now knows exactly what kind of people are behind it. Daniel Keene was connected too. There's another detail here that makes the entire story even more disturbing. Daniel Keene was involved in helping the United States construct a tunnel underneath the Iranian facility. So the plan wasn't just about sending aircraft into the area. The American government had already prepared another covert operation beneath the facility. The pilots were there to draw out the weapon, then the underground team could move in and destroy the facility from below. And this revelation gives Charlotte another reason to feel betrayed. She discovers that people she trusted knew much more about the mission than they ever told her. And because memory suppression drugs were later used, Charlotte had been unable to fully remember what happened. But now those memories are coming back. And suddenly, the mysterious crash from episode 1 isn't mysterious anymore. But how does this lead to the silos? This is the million-dollar question. If nanotechnology was simply a weapon used in one conflict, why would humanity need hundreds of underground silos? Because the implication is that the nanotech arms race didn't stay contained. It escalated. The technology spread. Different countries developed increasingly dangerous versions of these weapons, and eventually, the nightmare scenario became reality. The world outside became deadly. We don't yet have every single detail of how the apocalypse unfolded, and that's important. The show is deliberately leaving some pieces unanswered. Did nanobots directly poison the atmosphere? Did they destroy ecosystems? Did they attack human biology? Did nuclear weapons eventually become involved? Or did all of these things happen together? That's still part of the mystery. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The silos weren't built because someone randomly decided humanity needed underground bunkers. They were built because the people in charge believed the surface was about to become completely uninhabitable. And that makes the silo system even more terrifying. Here's where things get really interesting. The stated purpose of the silos is survival. Small populations are placed underground. They preserve human knowledge, and they maintain enough genetic diversity and resources to eventually rebuild civilization. And once the outside world becomes safe again, humanity is supposed to return. Sounds logical, right? Except there's a massive problem. The silos contain systems designed to kill people if certain conditions are violated. The safeguard protocols are perhaps the biggest example. So ask yourself this. If the entire purpose of the silos is to preserve humanity until the surface becomes safe, why create a system that can wipe out the very people you're trying to preserve? That doesn't sound like simple protection. It sounds like control. And this is where Silo becomes much more than a story about surviving the apocalypse. It becomes a story about who gets to decide what humanity is allowed to know. Can we trust Thurman and Stensen after what happened to Charlotte's crew? Probably not. Think about what we've learned. The government knew nanotechnology was becoming a global threat. They knew Iran had developed dangerous weapons. They knew Charlotte's mission was extremely risky. And yet, They didn't tell the pilots the full truth. Instead, they manipulated them into becoming bait. So when these same people are responsible for designing the silo system, we have to question everything. Maybe the rules inside the silos aren't simply there to protect people. Maybe they're there to prevent people from discovering something that could threaten the entire project. And that would explain why information is treated almost like a weapon. People aren't just forbidden from going outside. They're forbidden from asking the wrong questions. They're discouraged from exploring the past. And they're constantly reminded that curiosity can get them killed. That doesn't feel accidental. The bigger meaning of the Gray Goo, and honestly, I think the most fascinating part of the Gray Goo storyline isn't simply that nanobots destroyed the world. It's what the technology represents. The human race created something incredibly powerful because everyone was terrified that somebody else would create it first. The United States wanted to stay ahead, Iran wanted to catch up, other nations were developing their own systems, and eventually, the technology became too dangerous to control. It's basically an arms race taken to its logical extreme, and that fits perfectly with one of Silo's biggest themes. Humanity doesn't necessarily destroy itself because it wants to. Sometimes, it destroys itself because everyone is trying to protect themselves. Everyone thinks they're building the weapon that will keep them safe. Until suddenly, nobody is safe. So what happens next? We still have several enormous questions hanging over the story. What exactly happened during the final stages of the Nanotech war? How did the Gray Goo spread across the planet? Was the entire atmosphere contaminated? Who actually designed the final silo system? And perhaps most importantly, who decided that humanity should be controlled rather than simply protected? Because now we know the silos weren't just built after the apocalypse. They were planned before it. People knew something catastrophic was coming. They prepared for it. And Charlotte's story proves that some of the people involved were willing to sacrifice innocent lives to make sure their plan succeeded. So the Gray Goo isn't just another mysterious element in Silo. It could be the key to understanding the entire world we've been watching. The deadly surface, the silos, the memory suppression, the safeguard, the strict rules, and the reason nobody is allowed to know the truth. We still don't have every answer, but the pieces are finally starting to connect. And if the nanotech apocalypse is really what destroyed the old world, then the biggest question isn't whether humanity can survive the silos. It's whether humanity can ever be trusted with the technology that destroyed the world in the first place. Because sometimes the smallest things can create the biggest disasters. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know what you think about the Gray Goo theory and what you believe actually happened to the world outside the silos. And if you want more silo mysteries, theories, and ending explanations, make sure you stick around for the next one, because we're definitely not done uncovering what's hiding beneath the surface.
No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.